Chapter 001, A Night of Madness, Part 1. For the graduates of Xiaojia Academy, June 30th always carried a peculiar weight, damp, heavy, and tinged with an air of ambiguity. The scent of the nearby lake lingered in the breeze, thick with the sorrow of impending farewells. The year was 1993. Like every other year, June 30th arrived with its own strangeness, an unsettling day that, much like the Academy's eccentric Dean of Student Affairs, always managed to appear at the most inconvenient moment, scattering couples in its wake with a forced, mocking smile. The campus was laid out in opposing lines, the men's dormitories facing the women's with one volleyball court and 3 basketball courts marking the invisible no-man's land between them. Behind the women's dorms stood the laboratory buildings, and behind the men's, a small but well-known hill, half enclosed within the academy grounds and half fenced off from the outside. The hill was covered with dense trees and wild grasses, untamed, raw, and for that very reason the perfect sanctuary for young lovers. Though the setting sun still burned the sky with its glow, shadows had already swallowed much of the academy by the lakeshore. At the edge of a grove on that little hill, Hou Weidong crouched low in a thicket of tall grass. He had chosen his spot carefully. Thanks to the angle of the street lamp on the nearby path, this patch of grass fell into the perfect pocket of shadow. Anyone walking past a meter away would never notice him. He and his girlfriend, Zhang Xiaojia, had tested the place more than once and made it one of their usual rendezvous points. Hidden in the grass lay 2 smooth slabs of bluestone. Ho had pilfered them a year ago from a construction site. Set among the weeds, they served as makeshift benches, far more comfortable than the bare ground. From the Academy's broadcast room at the foot of the hill came the usual evening program, 10 long minutes of trivial campus news. As the chatter droned on, Ho couldn't help but recall his first year, when a short piece he had written had been broadcast. That night, he had been too thrilled to sleep. Now, years later, the same campus reports felt dull and repetitive, things he himself had once done, now stripped of their magic. After the news came 20 minutes of music. Sitting among the weeds, Ho could hear the strains drifting up the hill, the popular ballads of the day. In the village lives a girl named Xiaofang, pretty and kind with eyes so bright. Thank you for the love you gave me. A memory I will never forget. As the music played, couples began to emerge from their dormitories, gathering beneath the hill before heading toward the football field. By the time Xiaofang reached its final chorus, more than a dozen pairs had already passed along the path near Ho's hiding place. He had watched such scenes for years and could now tell at a glance. Freshmen walked timidly side by side. Sophomores and juniors dared to hold hands, while the seniors, unapologetic, clung to one another in open embrace. It was, after all, the last night before graduation. The administration had long since adopted a more humane approach, turning a blind eye to romances. Even the disciplinary squad had been dismissed for the evening. The understanding was simple. Let them have this night. By tomorrow, they will scatter in different directions. Ho, of course, had never worried about the disciplinary squad. Their captain was none other than Director Hu from the security office, while the deputy captain was always a student officer. For the past 2 years, Hao himself had held that position. He was often the one to decide when the squad would act, which meant he had roamed the lakeside, the grove, and the hill freely for 3 years, never once caught, because he was the one setting the traps. Now he sat on his bluestone bench, chewing a grass stalk, breathing in the scent of summer weeds, and muttering under his breath, "What's taking her so long? Doesn't she know what day this is?" More couples walked by, their intimacy only making his impatience grow. At last he heard it, the rustle of footsteps on dry leaves. The sound was so familiar that Hou leapt to his feet at once. When Xiaojia slipped into the thicket, he caught her in his arms, kissed her cheek, and scolded softly. Without time. You're late again. I'm a girl. Being late is my birthright, she teased, lifting a small bag of snacks. She kissed him back and sighed. Wannying was crying her eyes out. It took forever to calm her down. At the mention of her roommate, Hou tightened his embrace. He knew the story. Duaniying's boyfriend had been assigned to a state-owned factory in Hubei province, while she herself had been sent to a government enterprise in Yang County. For all her claims of being carefree when faced with real separation, her heart had shattered like porcelain against stone. Hou kissed Xiaojia's hair and murmured, half in relief, "Lucky for us, Yang and Shay are only 3 hours apart by bus. Seems fate's on our side." Xiaojia gave him a sharp pinch on the arm, pouting. "Some fate?" she said, putting extra weight on the word some. "I misspoke, Your Highness. Forgive my poor choice of words." He sank back onto the stone, pulling her onto his lap. Still, she kept her head down, lips sealed in mock anger. Desperate, Hou tried again, this time with a grin. "The Buddha said 500 years of karma earns one chance to share a boat, 1,000 years to share a bed. You and I? We've got 10,000 years of fate. Heaven as our canopy, earth as our blanket, together forever." Xiaojia couldn't help herself. Sweet words were her weakness. She smiled and, like a magician, produced several fragrant braised chicken wings from her bag. She fed one to Hou, who bit off a chunk before letting her nibble at the same piece. With a beautiful woman in his arms, Hou's hormones surged like wildfire. His hands slid instinctively beneath her blouse, fingertips grazing smooth, fragrant skin. That night, Xiaojia had chosen an orange two-piece suit. The color hardly mattered in the dark, but the style did. Skirts were far more convenient than trousers, and a matching top meant everything could be set right again in a hurry. The outfit was perfect for a clandestine meeting. Her body went slack against him as he caressed her, but her thoughts were tangled. Graduation loomed only hours away. She wiped her hands clean with a tissue, then clung to his chest as though he might vanish into the night wind. Hou buried his nose in her hair, whispering hoarsely, "I can't take it anymore. I'm burning up." She reached down, her hand brushing against undeniable hardness. She bit her lip, then whispered back, "Tonight, I'll give myself to you." His heart pounded. Though he had long imagined this, hearing her say it still set his blood racing. But his instincts, as a seasoned squad leader, kicked in. This patch of grass was too close to the path. Other couples could stumble upon them at any moment. "It's not safe here," he said quickly. "Let's go higher up the hill." Halfway up, the old wall that divided the campus from the outside world loomed. Years ago, someone had smashed a hole in it just large enough for a person to squeeze through. In '92, a group of thugs had crept in through that hole, ambushed a couple, and stabbed the boy twice. He had fought them off, barely, and the girl had been spared, but only because of his strength. The hole was patched afterward, but just days ago, Hou and Xinjai had discovered a new breach. Xiaojia hesitated. "That broken wall, it scares me." Hou grinned and pulled a dagger from his belt. "Not with this. Nothing to fear." He had been practicing sanda, Chinese kickboxing, since his freshman year, and 4 years of training gave him confidence. Against a handful of street thugs, he wasn't worried. He and Xiaojia had wandered this hill for 3 years without incident. What were the odds trouble would find them tonight of all nights? Step by step, they climbed to a small, secluded clearing he had long marked as perfect. The ground dipped inward, hidden by a dense thicket overhead. From there they could see the academy's football field below while remaining invisible from behind. With a flourish, Hou pulled out a folded bedsheet from his bag, a relic from winter now destined for a different purpose. Xiaojia flushed hot, her heart racing. You planned this, didn't you? Dug the hole, laid the trap, and waited for me to fall in. Shameless. Her words were half protest, half laughter. Together they spread the sheet, then set his dagger within reach, and in the shadows of the hill they clung to each other with desperate, reckless abandon. Chapter 2, A Night of Madness, Part 2. Over the past 3 years, the two of them had done everything lovers could do, everything except the final step. After about a frantic groping, they collapsed breathless onto the sheet. Do you think we might end up with a baby? Xiaojia asked nervously. Grinning with pride, Hou Weidong reached into his clothes and pulled out a small box. Xiaojia, look what I've got. She took it, held it up to the moonlight, studied it for a moment, and gasped. A condom. Exactly. Cost me 10 yuan, Hou said smugly. For a college student in 1993, 10 yuan wasn't pocket change. He made sure she knew just how much he had paid. That condom carried its own little story. 2 months earlier, swept up in passion, they had decided to buy some. But when they stepped into a pharmacy and saw a young woman behind the counter, their courage had evaporated. They wandered through several shops after that, checking prices, but every store was bustling with customers. Neither of them dared to buy condoms under so many watchful eyes. They ended up purchasing 2 boxes of Band-Aids instead and slinking away empty-handed. 4 weeks afterward, they laughed at their own cowardice. Now, Hou slid off Xiaojia's white panties with ease, but then fumbled with the condom package. The 10 yuan box had surprisingly sturdy packaging, and he felt like an ant on a hot stove, struggling and failing to tear it open. Lying back on the sheet, Xiaojia gazed calmly at the star-filled sky. For her, this step felt natural. After years of love, tonight was inevitable. Seeing Hou's clumsy frustration, she reached over, took the box, and said, "Let me." She felt along the edges, found the tiny tear notch, and with a quick rip, freed the condom. Hou only chuckled and shook his head. "I don't know how to use it. You'll have to put it on me." Xiaojia pinched his arm hard. "If you don't know, how would I?" "Don't overthink it. You just roll it on. Didn't you pay attention when the Academy screened that sex ed film?" Xiaojia burst into laughter. "You boys all swore you hadn't watched seriously, but every one of you was practically drooling." Her cheeks flushed hot as she fumbled for a while before finally managing to get it on him, awkward but determined. Hou, healthy and strong, often bragged in the dormitory with Zhang Dali and Lu Kun about women, speaking as though he were an expert. In truth, all 3 of them were virgins. What they knew came mostly from grainy, pirated videotapes. By the time the condom was in place, Hou was already at the brink. Beneath him, Xiaojia squeezed her eyes shut, body trembling, offering herself like the countless fantasies Hou had played out in his mind. But now, when fantasy became reality, he suddenly realized he had no idea what to do next. At the last moment, it was Xiaojia who opened her eyes, saw his bewildered face, and gently guided him forward. Just as he was about to enter that long, dreamed of harbor of bliss, he lost control and erupted. Xiaojia, innocent and inexperienced herself, didn't quite grasp what had happened. She only knew that despite his frantic movements, he never reached his destination before spilling everything. She sighed in relief, but a faint disappointment tugged at her heart. Still, being the gentle soul she was, she wrapped her arms around his broad back, soothing his bruised pride. Hou was devastated. This was the night he had dreamed of, yet it ended before it even began. Inwardly he howled, so this is what they mean by premature ejaculation? By now the sun had long vanished beyond the horizon, and the sky was crowded with stars. From the hilltop, the lights of Xiaojia Academy sparkled like constellations. Along the lakeshore, the rippling water carried shimmering reflections, breathtakingly beautiful. At the far western edge lay the music department. From the curving S-shaped concert hall drifted faint strains of melody, piercing, sharp, like blades of sound aimed straight at Hou and Xiaojia's hearts. The long-imagined first night, ruined by an untimely release, Hou, who prided himself on being manly, felt humiliated. His self-esteem smarted. Staring down at the campus where he had spent 4 years of youth, knowing he would leave it tomorrow, he was overcome by a sorrow he could not name, wild, sudden, and inevitable, like weeds sprouting after rain. Xiaojia sat with her back against his chest. She shared his melancholy, but carried another burden as well, the lingering shadow of her parents' furious faces, memories so vivid they made her shiver even now. "Are you really coming home with me tomorrow?" she asked softly. Hou didn't answer immediately. Instead, he buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. It was the scent unique to young women, fresh, alive, like mushrooms springing up in the mountains after a summer storm. It was his favorite fragrance. Every time they met, he had to savor it. He knew what weighed on her mind. A daughter-in-law has to meet her in-law sooner or later. Tomorrow, we'll have our diplomas in hand. It's time to face reality. I'm ready for a long battle. But even as he spoke, unease crept into him. Are your parents really that fierce? I don't even know how to describe it. Ever since they read that letter, they've been furious. My mother's the decision maker at home. Whatever she says goes. My father and I, we just take the scolding. Hou chuckled bitterly. Smart as you are, why on earth would you hide my letters in the bookcase of all places? The memory made him shake his head. Last summer, after their breakup, they had agreed to write to each other at least every 2 days. To avoid her parents' watchful eyes, Hou sent his letters to one of Xiaojia's close friends, who then passed them along. Once she had them, she read each 10 times over, unable to bear destroying them. But her room had no good hiding spot. One day, while her parents were at work, she wandered around the house, searching for a secret nook. Her parents both worked as technicians at a factory, and though housing was scarce, they had been lucky enough to receive a 1-bedroom apartment with a living room, kitchen, and bathroom, already considered quite decent. By the time Xiaojia left for college, she had blossomed from a scrawny girl into a radiant young woman, far too grown to keep sleeping in the living room. She had taken over her parents' old bedroom while they moved to the living room. In that living room stood an old bookcase, crammed with dusty volumes, many from the Cultural Revolution era. It hadn't been touched in years. Xiaojia thought it perfect. She tucked Hou's letters among the forgotten books. But fate has its cruel sense of humor. Not long after, her mother, Chen Yingrong, happened to be home on a shift rotation. Bored, she pulled out one of those old books and, by chance, stumbled upon the hidden letters. One in particular described Hou's swaggering tales of brawls he had gotten into. The discovery detonated like a barrage of bombs. That summer became a battlefield. Chen Yingrong and Xiaojia's father, Zhang Yuan-Zhang, turned into a revolving stage of faces, black, red, and mottled with rage. At last, Chen pulled her ultimate weapon, the threat of cutting ties. Under that relentless assault, Xiaojia's will crumbled. Heartbroken, she promised to break up with Hou. Obedient as she was, she had never endured such bombardment before. For the sake of her parents, she had agreed. But when she saw Hou again on that little hill of Xiaojia Academy, she hadn't even managed to say the words before his fierce embrace swept away her fragile resolve. They had fallen back into love, and from that moment on, their relationship became a secret war, hidden from parents and teachers alike. Chapter 3, A Night of Madness, Part 3. On the night before leaving school, the warm breeze drifted slowly, unknown insects chirped tirelessly deep in the woods, and the shimmering reflections of lights upon the lake created a scene hard to forget. Hou Weidong knew Xiaojia's moods all too well. When they were together, if she kept her mouth closed without speaking, it meant she was not in a good mood. And the reason behind it was always self-explanatory. He slid one hand beneath Xiaojia's clothes, grasping her petite breast from behind, gently caressing it. After a while, Hou Weidong grew aroused again, pressing hard against Xiaojia's back. Leaning toward her ear, he whispered, "I'm ready again." Xiaojia obediently lay down on the sheet, while Hou Weidong knelt beside her, slowly rolling her skirt upward, inch by inch revealing her thighs. In the moonlight, they looked smooth and fair, like white jade. Xiaojia had always loved sports, both badminton and volleyball. She was even on the school's volleyball team. Years of training had made her legs particularly well-shaped. This was what Hou Weidong adored most. Just then, Xiaojia felt a mosquito bite her thigh. With a sharp smack, she slapped at it. Mountain mosquitoes were big, with long, strong proboscises and quick movements. At the sound of her slap, the mosquito buzzed off swiftly. Hou Weidong's heart was pounding faster when suddenly a lewd voice rang out. "Looks like there's another good show to watch." 3 figures leapt from behind the bushes. They had been lying in wait at the top of the hill for prey, but had caught nothing so far. Just when they were losing hope, the sharp smack had alerted them that prey was near. "This place really is secluded. You two sure know how to pick a spot. Now, be honest, how many times have you done it here? Why don't you put on a show for us?" On this very hill, incidents of street thugs harassing student couples had occurred before. As captain of the campus patrol, Hou Weidong had once lain in ambush with the head of campus security, hoping to catch them in the act. But fate had played its trick. On the very night before graduation, the outgoing deputy captain of the patrol finally met the trouble he had long anticipated. Unfortunately, the timing could not have been worse. The moment he heard the voice, Hou Weidong's heart tightened. He gripped the dagger by his side and pulled Xiaojia up. She wore a 2-piece dress, which at that moment showed its advantage. She could stand quickly with her clothing still neat and proper. Trembling, she hid behind Hou Weidong, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. One tall man stepped forward, pointing at Hou Weidong and growling, "Get out of the way. If you make a sound or move wrong, we'll stab you both to death." Hou Weidong forced himself to stay calm. He had 200 yuan on him, money for tomorrow's journey. He pulled out 100, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're just students. We don't have much money. This 100 yuan is all I've got. Take it and let us go." The tall man waved his knife threateningly. "Hand it over. Stand down there and don't move. When I'm finished with your girlfriend, you can take her home. But if either of you dares to scream, I'll stab her right through." It was clear they intended to assault Xiaojia. Hou Weidong realized there would be no peaceful way out tonight. His mind hardened, but he pretended to cower. "Please, I beg you. Here's the money." Speaking as though in fear, he moved closer. Hou Weidong had been on the track and field team in both middle school and high school, and later trained with the campus martial arts team. Years of training had made him strong. Track athletes were known for being mischievous and bold, often among the poorer students academically. Hou Weidong was an exception. His grades were average, but as a teammate and having grown up idolizing Chow Yun-fat's A Better Tomorrow, he was brimming with hot-blooded passion. Alongside his teammates, he had fought in many street brawls. He was far from the helpless bookworm type. The three thugs hadn't noticed Hou Weidong closing in while speaking. In the past, they had always gotten their way easily. Once they flashed a knife, most student couples froze like chickens, letting them do as they pleased. Over the years, only one couple had ever dared resist. With success emboldening them, they grew increasingly reckless. In a sudden burst, Hou Weidong lunged at the tall man, stabbing his thigh with the dagger. He felt the blade meet resistance, and the man screamed in pain. Hou Weidong pressed the attack, slashing wildly. "Damn you! Come at me if you want to die!" Another thug yelped like a slaughtered pig as the blade cut him too. The third, seeing the scene turn bad, abandoned his friends and bolted into the woods without hesitation. With Xiaojia at his side, and not knowing how many more might be lurking nearby, Hou Weidong dared not stay. Grabbing her hand, he dashed downhill. Human potential is limitless. In that moment of danger, they leapt over gullies and obstacles as if running hurdles, swift as flowing water. Once they reached the bottom and stood on the small path, with no pursuers in sight, Xiaojia's legs gave out and she collapsed onto the ground. "Come on! If they catch up, we're in trouble." Hou Weidong pulled her up, urging her into a jog along the path until they reached the edge of the sports field. There, dozens of couples were strolling or sitting together. Inside the field, with no sign of pursuit, Hou Weidong finally slowed down. As his fear settled, dread rose within him. Panic-stricken, he asked, "Did I kill someone? Did I kill him?" They stood trembling at the center of the field. Hou Weidong noticed the dagger still clenched tightly in his hand. "I've got to get rid of this," he said. Studying political science, he knew he couldn't keep it. Carefully wiping away his fingerprints with his clothes, he added, "We'll throw it into Lotus Pond. No one will ever find the weapon." At the pond, finding no one nearby, Hou Weidong crouched low and tossed the dagger into the water. Slowly, his nerves began to calm. To steel himself, he muttered, "When a man dies, that's the end. No point thinking about it." This crude saying was his roommate Jiang Dali's catchphrase. Whenever Jiang did something reckless, he used it to pump up his courage. After 4 years of hearing it, Hou Weidong could say it fluently. Strangely, each time he said it, his courage indeed grew. It wasn't yet lights out. Shadows of couples still dotted the sports field. Hou Weidong reasoned if one of those thugs was badly hurt, they'd have to pass Lotus Pond to get to the school hospital. "Let's stay here a while. If no one comes through, it means the injuries aren't serious. Then I can relax." Since the nearest hospital was the academy's affiliated hospital, and the only way there was past Lotus Pond, Hou Weidong decided to keep watch. They went into a snack shop by the pond where all the tables were already occupied by couples. The owner's prized possession was a pair of loudspeakers from which played the same old song, now worn from repetition. A girl named Xiufang in the village, beautiful and kind, with big bright eyes and long braids. The shop owner knew Hou Weidong well. Seeing him and Xiaojia hand in hand, he greeted warmly, "Hou Weidong, is this your girlfriend? Leaving tomorrow, and only now you bring her out? You've hidden her well, boy." Xiaozhou Academy was conservative, discouraging student romances. For student leaders, romance could bring harsh punishment. Hou Weidong, a well-regarded student leader, had gone to great lengths to conceal his relationship. The owner knew both Hou Weidong and Xiaojia, but hadn't realized they were a couple. He brought out a tea table and 2 small stools for them, quickly served a few dishes Hou Weidong often ordered, then went off to settle another couple's bill. After eating, with no sign of injured men passing by, Hou Weidong began to relax, though Xiaojia still looked shaken. The speakers now played another familiar song by Lao Lang. You used to be so careful, always borrowing half an eraser from me. Who will marry the sentimental you? Who will make you a wedding dress? The owner brought out a pack of Hongtishan cigarettes the finest brand students could afford and offered one to Hou Weidong. Have a smoke. I hear Yang's party committee was recruiting here and you placed second. You've got a bright future ahead. Don't forget us old friends when you're an official. Hou Weidong forced a smile. Bright future? It's just finding a job. The owner sat down beside him. I have a cousin in the Yang County Committee. Want me to help pull some strings? But Hou Weidong's mind was still stuck on the mountain. At a nearby table, a few men called out, Boss, check please. The owner rose, chuckling. Connections matter. With help, you could be assigned to the city. If they send you out to the mountains, places like Huping or Qinglin, you'd need 3 hours just to reach town. That'd be real countryside exile. If you need me to make a call, just say so. Thanks, Hou Weidong replied half-heartedly. When the owner left, Hou Weidong noticed scratches on his hands, likely from running through the underbrush. Xiaoji, did you get scratched? He asked. Xiaojia had been staring blankly at a plate of peanuts. At his words, she looked down at her leg and gasped, Ah. Tears welled in her eyes. Hou Weidong followed her gaze and saw her fair calf covered in a web of fine cuts, each oozing tiny beads of blood, standing out starkly against her pale skin. Chapter 4, A Night of Madness, Part 4. Xiaojia's tears rolled down like scorched peas, falling to the ground with a sound that seemed to echo pat, pat. Hou Weidong suddenly felt anxious. Up on the mountain, he was sure he had stabbed someone, but where exactly and how badly, he had no idea. If he had killed a man, the trouble would be immense. This thought kept circling in his mind, making him uneasy and unable to comfort the sobbing Xiaojia. The two of them sat in silence. Just then, from the north end of Lotus Pond came the sound of crying. A drunken young woman clutched the arm of a tall man, weeping and wailing, You must come with me. Kendrupirlud, Dirost Perlotamo, recognized the man. He was the handsome heartthrob of the media department, a well-known playboy. He appeared quite sober, embarrassed as he tried to lead his girlfriend away, but failed. On the night of farewell, crying was normal. Around Lotus Pond sat many couples about to part ways. Each was immersed in their own sorrow. Happiness might look the same, but the pain of separation was different for everyone. Xiaozhou Academy, though priding itself on compassion, was filled with rules that punished human nature. At 11 o'clock, lights in all dormitories were switched off at once. Teachers moved like soldiers on alert, combing through the woods and along the sports field, urging apart reluctant couples and sending them back to their dorms. When Hou Weidong saw that no one from the hill appeared, his heart settled a little. He could judge that the youths up there were not seriously injured. Squeezing Xiaojia's hand, he said, Lights are out. Let's go back. After the dorms went dark, Vice Dean G. Dowlin checked his watch and said to Director Hu from the security office, Are your people ready? Remember, this is a delicate time. Prioritize education. If anyone causes serious trouble, take their names. Tomorrow, we'll withhold their diplomas. Who knew that graduation night always turned into a wild release, a test of the security office's ability. He had already drawn up a security plan, mobilizing respected teachers from each department into small groups scattered through the dorms to keep order. Just as Ji lowered his hand from his watch, a bottle came flying out from a window of the Law and Media Department dorms, smashing with a loud bang on the ground. That shattering sound was the signal. The graduates had been waiting, fully prepared to unleash their final night of madness. In Hou Weidong's dormitory were 5 men: Zhang Dali, Chen Shu, Lu Kun, Qian Heiyang, and Hou Weidong. Zhang Dali and the others grabbed buckets and ink bottles, anything that could make a loud crash. The moment they heard the glass break, they went wild, hurling objects out the window. Hou Weidong's mind was still on the mountain. If he had killed someone, what then? As a law student, he knew too well, even if it was self-defense and not a criminal charge, it could still affect his job assignment, even ruin his future. He sat numbly, watching Chen Shu throw down the battered thermos he had used for 4 years, but Hou himself had no heart to toss out the big bucket at his feet. Director, whose sharp voice rang out below, "Who threw that? Do you want to lose your diplomas?" His threats came every year, hollow and powerless. The students all knew it. In answer, objects of every kind flew out from nearly every window. Soon, the girls' dorms across the volleyball court joined in, though with less force. Small items clattered to the ground, but they had another weapon: their shrill screams. Like Japanese planes bombing Pearl Harbor, their cries pierced the night sky of Xiaojia Academy. The chaos lasted for several minutes until the voices of teachers, kind or stern, echoed across the campus. The rain of objects gradually lessened. Department heads and teachers moved through the halls, knocking on doors, speaking patiently, even handing out cigarettes to familiar students. The first wave of madness ended. Zhang Dali was still itching for more. As soon as the civil law teacher left their room, he nudged Hou Weidong. "Danghua, why are you staring blankly? Your bucket's still there." Hou didn't want to seem odd, so he grinned. "I'll wait till the teachers leave, then I'll start it up again." Short and sly Chen Shu slipped out and soon returned with 2 bottles. Laughing loudly, Fatty had stashed 2 bottles to throw later. "I stole them." After half an hour, the teachers, seeing the students calm down, left the dorms. Vice Dean Ji, once a student himself, had fond memories of such nights. Back then, he was no less wild than the most mischievous students. But tonight, as the representative of the academy, he hoped things wouldn't go too far. If accidents happened, joy could easily turn to tragedy. Watching the teachers retreat from the dorms, he checked his watch again, calculating how much longer the frenzy might last. Standing beside him, Director, who said, "Dean Ji, why don't you go back and rest? Looks like nothing serious will happen tonight." Hou and Ji were the same age, both 33, yet Ji was already a vice dean while Hou remained a lowly security director. He felt resentment, though dared not show it. Since Ji stayed, the other teachers also stayed, waiting around the volleyball court. Hou Weidong poked his head out the window. By the light of the street lamps, he saw the ground littered with broken buckets and bottles. Picking up the lunchbox he had used for 4 years, he hurled it out. Seeing Hou join in, Zhang Dali jumped up, grabbed one of Chen Shu's stolen bottles, and flung it. Chen Shu, unwilling to lose out, shouted, "Baldy, leave one for me." The second wave of madness began. From next door came Fatty's bellow like a pig being slaughtered. "Damn it, who stole my bottles?" When at last the clattering died down, Ji's tense face relaxed. He checked his elegant, expensive watch, an accessory that matched his calm, aristocratic demeanor. Coolly, he said, 12:15. About the same as last year. Teachers, you can go home now." The next morning, the 5 men of Dorm 509 rose in silence. After the madness of the night, they each packed their belongings. 4 years together had seen minor quarrels, but no real conflict. Their bond was genuine. They did not cry at parting, but a heaviness weighed on their hearts. Carrying their things, they stepped out of the dorm, crunching over the debris scattered on the ground, and headed toward the volleyball court. Parked outside were buses bound for Dongyang, Shes, and other cities. Spotting Xiaojia emerging from the girls' dorm with a small bag, Hou Weidong hurried over. Around them, classmates were busy finding their buses. No one had time for formal goodbyes. When a tree falls, the monkeys scatter. That was exactly the scene of departure day.